She was a 130-pound woman in a faded flannel shirt, handcuffed to a steel table, accused of stolen valor and murder. The FBI laughed in her face. But when her bruised hand dropped a heavy solid bronze coin onto the metal table, the arrogance instantly drained from the room. The fluorescent lights in Interrogation Room 4 at the Seattle Police Department had a persistent, irritating hum. It was the kind of low-frequency drone that usually drove suspects to the brink after 6 hours of isolation. Riley Mercer had been sitting in the metal chair for 8. She hadn't asked for water. She hadn't asked for a lawyer. She hadn't even shifted her weight. On the other side of the two-way mirror, Detective Thomas O'Grady rubbed his tired eyes, clutching a lukewarm cup of bitter coffee. At 52, O'Grady had seen every flavor of criminal the Pacific Northwest had to offer. Beside him stood Officer Brian Jenkins, a 26-year-old rookie with too much gel in his hair and a chip on his shoulder the size of a cinder block. "Look at her," Jenkins scoffed, crossing his arms. "She's practically catatonic. She's probably spun out on something. We caught her dead to rights in the stairwell of the abandoned grain terminal, Thomas. She had the pelican case. She had the ghillie netting. She's the shooter." O'Grady stared through the glass at the woman. Riley Mercer looked to be in her mid-30s. Her dark blonde hair was tied back in a messy, practical bun. She wore a faded Pendleton flannel, dirt-stained Carhartt work pants, and scuffed hiking boots. Her hands were resting flat on the aluminum table, casually overlapping. "She's not spun out, Brian," O'Grady said quietly, his brow furrowing. "Look at her heart rate. Look at her breathing. She's resting." Resting? After putting a .338 Lapua Magnum round through the engine block of a moving cartel SUV from 900 yards away, and then putting a second round through the driver's side window? Jenkins shook his head. "She's a civilian. A florist, for God's sake. The background check says she owns a wholesale plant nursery in Oregon. There's no way she made that shot. She's covering for someone, probably a boyfriend. We just need to press her." O'Grady wasn't so sure. The shot that had disrupted an active kidnapping by the Reyes cartel earlier that night was nothing short of miraculous. It required factoring in a swirling crosswind coming off Puget Sound, the spindrift of the bullet, and the sheer elevation of the abandoned terminal. The responding SWAT team had found Riley descending the stairwell 3 minutes after the shots were fired. She hadn't run. She had simply complied, handing over a heavy black case and submitting to the cuffs. O'Grady pushed the door open, the heavy steel clicking shut behind him. Jenkins followed, slamming a thick manila folder onto the table to manufacture a jump scare. Riley didn't flinch. Her hazel eyes slowly drifted up from the table, locking onto Jenkins with a terrifyingly calm indifference before shifting to O'Grady. "Miss Mercer," O'Grady started, pulling out a chair and sitting down slowly. "It's been a long night. We have an abandoned terminal, 2 dead cartel hitmen, an intact kidnapping victim who is currently safe in protective custody, and you, walking down the stairs with a customized M2010 enhanced sniper rifle." Riley remained silent. Jenkins leaned over the table, invading her personal space. "You think this is a game? You think you're in a movie? You're looking at life without parole, lady. We know you didn't pull the trigger. You don't have the training. You don't have the physical mass to handle the recoil of that weapon without bruising your shoulder, which, by the way, the female officer who searched you confirmed is completely unbruised." Riley tilted her head slightly. "A proper cheek weld and a heavily compensated muzzle brake mitigate recoil, Officer Jenkins," she said. Her voice was raspy, quiet, but steady as bedrock. "You don't need mass. You need mechanics." Jenkins blinked, taken aback by the technical terminology, but quickly recovered his aggressive posture. "Oh, listen to G.I. Jane here. You read that on a Wikipedia page? Or did your boyfriend teach you that before he handed you the rifle and ran?" "There is no boyfriend," Riley said flatly. "Then explain the shot." Jenkins slammed his palm on the table. 900 yards, wind blowing east at 15 knots, a moving target. You expect us to believe a civilian florist pulled that off? O'Grady raised a hand, signaling Jenkins to back off. "Riley, listen to me. If you're protecting someone, you need to tell us now. The people who were in that SUV are part of a very dangerous syndicate. If you take the fall for this, you are painting a target on your own back." "The target is already neutralized," Riley replied, her eyes boring into O'Grady. "The men in that vehicle were dispatched to execute a federal informant. The informant is safe. The threat is over. You should be processing the scene, not me." "We are processing the scene," O'Grady countered, "and we found nothing linking you to any authorized law enforcement agency. We ran your prints, we ran your name, nothing. Before Riley could respond, the interrogation room door violently swung open. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit walked in, carrying a sleek leather tablet case. He had the unmistakable air of federal authority and federal arrogance. "Detectives, you're relieved," the man barked, not even looking at them as he pulled out a chair opposite Riley. "Special Agent David Caldwell, FBI, I'm taking over." O'Grady bristled, standing up. "Excuse me, Agent Caldwell, this is my precinct. We're in the middle of an interrogation." "And you're getting nowhere, O'Grady," Caldwell said, opening his tablet and swiping through a document. "Because you're treating her like a mastermind. She's not. She's a fraud." Caldwell looked up, a condescending smirk playing on his lips as he stared at Riley. "I just got off the phone with the Department of Defense. It took some digging, but we finally penetrated the firewall on your so-called classified background, Miss Mercer. Or should I say, Seaman Recruit Mercer." Jenkins snorted from the corner of the room. "Navy?" "Barely," Caldwell laughed. "She enlisted right out of high school, did a stint in Coronado. Let me read you her official discharge papers. Administrative separation, role, supply clerk. You counted socks and handed out MREs, Riley. You never even saw a combat zone." Riley's expression remained entirely unchanged. She looked at Caldwell the way a biologist might look at a particularly noisy insect. "Stolen valor is a pathetic crime, Miss Mercer," Caldwell continued, his voice dripping with venom. "But it usually ends with some sad loser wearing unearned medals at a parade. You decided to play sniper. You bought a high-end rifle, dressed up in tactical gear, and trespassed on a live crime scene. Maybe you wanted to feel like a hero. Maybe you thought you could shoot the cartel guys yourself. But the real shooter, whoever he is, took the shot, and you just happened to be in the wrong stairwell at the wrong time." "Is that your working theory, Agent Caldwell?" Riley asked quietly. "It's the only theory that fits the facts," Caldwell snapped, leaning forward. "Because the alternative is that a discharged Navy supply clerk somehow acquired Tier 1 sniper skills, bypassed local law enforcement, and executed a sanctioned hit on American soil. And we both know women aren't even permitted in Tier 1 special warfare units, let alone as designated marksmen." "Regulations changed in 2016, Riley murmured, almost to herself. "Don't play games with me," Caldwell roared, slamming his fist down. "I want the name of the man who took that shot. You tell me who he is, and I'll charge you with obstruction and trespassing. You keep playing this delusion of being a covert operator, and I will personally see you charged as an accessory to double homicide. Do you understand me?" The room fell dead silent. O'Grady watched Riley closely. Most suspects, when confronted with federal charges and overwhelming aggression, either broke down in tears, lawyered up, or started screaming. Riley did none of those things. Instead, she let out a slow, deliberate exhale. "Agent Caldwell," Riley said, her voice dropping an octave, carrying a sudden, commanding weight that sent a chill down O'Grady's spine. "You are running a Glock 19 inches and injection-molded paddle holster that you bought off Amazon. You haven't cleaned your weapon in at least a month. I can smell the carbon buildup from across the table. Officer Jenkins is standing in the fatal funnel of the doorway, and Detective O'Grady is the only one in this room who actually realizes you are entirely out of your depth." Caldwell's face flushed a deep, violent crimson. "You listen to me, you little—" "No, you listen," Riley interrupted, and for the first time, her eyes flashed with absolute, terrifying authority. "My service jacket says supply clerk, because it has to. If you had higher clearance than a regional field office suit, you would know to check the SR9 file directory under Naval Special Warfare Command, but you don't have that clearance. So I'll make this simple for you." Riley slowly raised her handcuffed hands. Caldwell flinched backward, his hand instinctively dropping to his hip. Jenkins shouted a warning, stepping forward. "Relax," Riley said. She reached her bruised, calloused fingers into the small breast pocket of her flannel shirt. For an agonizing second, the three men tensed, expecting a hidden weapon, a lockpick, a razor blade. Instead, Riley pulled out a heavy, circular object. She held it between her thumb and forefinger for a fraction of a second before letting it drop. Clack. The heavy, solid bronze coin hit the aluminum table. It didn't bounce. It spun once, the heavy metal ringing through the silent interrogation room like a funeral bell, before settling flat under the harsh fluorescent lights. O'Grady leaned in to look at it. It wasn't a standard military challenge coin. It was heavily worn, the edges chipped and darkened with age and sweat, but the raised emblem in the center was unmistakable. It was a golden eagle, clutching a trident and an anchor, a naval special warfare insignia, the SEAL Trident. But it was the detailing around the edge that made O'Grady's breath catch in his throat. Emblazoned across the top, in dark, imposing lettering, were the words, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Underneath the trident, stamped deeply into the bronze, was a Roman numeral. V. Caldwell stared at the coin, all the color draining from his face. This is a fake, he stammered, though his voice lacked any conviction. You bought this online. DEVGRU? SEAL Team 6? You're out of your mind. Turn it over, Riley commanded softly. O'Grady reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and flipped the heavy bronze coin. On the back, there was no insignia. There was only a deeply engraved serial number, a skull, and 2 words etched into the metal. Words that were legendary within the darkest, most classified corners of the Pentagon. Red Squadron. Call the number on the back of the coin, Agent Caldwell, Riley said, leaning back in her chair, the handcuffs clinking against the table. It's a direct line to the Joint Special Operations Command watch floor in Fort Bragg. Read them the serial number. And then you are going to uncuff me, give me my Pelican case back, and pretend you never saw me. Caldwell looked from the coin to O'Grady and finally back to the 130-pound woman sitting across from him. The room was so quiet they could hear the erratic, panicked thump of Caldwell's heart. He didn't yell. He didn't mock her. He slowly, numbly, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his cell phone. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed, a harsh mechanical mosquito that seemed to amplify the suffocating silence in Interrogation Room 4. Special Agent David Caldwell held his iPhone as if it were a live grenade. His thumb hovered over the keypad. He looked at Detective Thomas O'Grady, who was staring intently at the DevGru challenge coin resting on the scratched aluminum table. Officer Brian Jenkins was practically holding his breath in the corner. Riley Mercer simply waited, her hands resting calmly in her lap, the handcuffs loosely binding her wrists. She didn't look arrogant. She looked bored. Caldwell swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing above his tight collar. He punched in the 11-digit number etched beneath the skull on the back of the coin. He put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. 1 ring, 2. On the 3rd ring, the line clicked. There was no standard military greeting. There was no, "You have reached Fort Bragg." There was only a cold, electronic hiss, followed by a voice devoid of any identifiable regional accent. Authentication code. Caldwell cleared his throat, his federal bravado suddenly vanishing. This is Special Agent David Caldwell, FBI Seattle Field Office, badge number 8849, Alpha. I'm calling regarding a coin. A challenge coin with a serial number. Provide the serial number, Agent Caldwell. The voice was flat, unyielding. Caldwell read the alphanumeric string etched into the bronze. Silence descended on the line. It wasn't the silence of someone typing on a keyboard. It was the absolute, dead air silence of a secured, encrypted line being routed through multiple secure servers. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably, his leather duty belt creaking. When the voice returned, it wasn't the operator. It was an older man. His voice carried the gravelly, authoritative weight of decades spent in the darkest corners of American foreign policy. Agent Caldwell, this is Rear Admiral Thomas Croft, Naval Special Warfare Command, operating out of the Dam Neck Annex. To whom am I speaking, and more importantly, why the hell are you calling a Tier 1 emergency extraction line? Caldwell's face went completely white. Dam Neck, Virginia, was the heavily guarded, highly classified headquarters of SEAL Team 6. Admiral Croft, Caldwell stammered, standing up straight, as if the man could see him through the phone. Sir, I am currently at the Seattle Police Department. We have a suspect in custody, a female. She was apprehended at the scene of a double homicide involving a high-powered sniper rifle. She presented this coin and told me to call the number. Does this woman have dark blonde hair, hazel eyes, and a scar running parallel to her left collarbone? The Admiral asked. O'Grady's eyes widened. He looked at Riley. The top button of her flannel was unfastened, and right there, peeking out from the collar of her undershirt, was a thin, white scar. Yes, sir, Caldwell whispered. She does. Agent Caldwell, listen to me very carefully, Admiral Croft said, the temperature of his voice dropping to absolute zero. You are currently detaining an active-duty naval special warfare operator attached to a classified JSOC low-visibility detachment. You have compromised a sanctioned, covert, domestic overwatch operation. Who else is in the room with you? Just 2 local PD officers, sir. A detective and a patrolman. Remove the handcuffs, now. Caldwell's hands were shaking. He fumbled in his pocket for the universal handcuff key. He practically lunged across the table, grabbing Riley's wrists and frantically unlocking the steel bracelets. Riley rubbed her bruised wrists slowly, never breaking eye contact with the FBI agent. They're off, Admiral, Caldwell said, backing away as if Riley were suddenly made of radioactive material. Agent Caldwell, your field office director, SAC Mitchell, is being contacted as we speak, Croft continued. You are going to return Operator Mercer's equipment immediately. You are going to scrub her name from the local intake registry. You are going to classify those 2 dead men not as cartel members, but as highly armed, unidentified domestic terrorists. And then, Agent Caldwell, you are going to sit down, shut your mouth, and wait for my sweep team to arrive. Do you understand these instructions? Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Put her on. Riley leaned forward, her face mere inches from the phone. I'm here. Actual. The Admiral's tone shifted instantly from commanding to conversational, entirely ignoring the 3 stunned law enforcement officers in the room. Echo 7, sit rep. Targets neutralized. The asset is secure and unaware of the overwatch, Riley said, her voice crisp and professional. However, I stayed behind to assess the secondary objective. The bait was taken. I have the package. Understood, Echo 7. Transport is 3 minutes out. Secure your gear and vanish. Croft out. The line went dead. For a long moment, nobody moved. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed deafening. O'Grady was the first to break the silence. He slowly sat back in his chair, letting out a long, incredulous exhale. A supply clerk, huh? Riley offered a small, humorless smile. Best cover they could give me. Nobody looks twice at the girl handing out boots and Kevlar. Jenkins, the arrogant rookie, looked like he was going to be sick. He had spent the last hour berating a woman who was actively employed by the most lethal counter-terrorism unit on the planet. I told you about recoil, he mumbled stupidly. You did, Riley said, standing up. She rolled her shoulders, the joints popping loudly in the quiet room. Now, I believe you have a Black Pelican case that belongs to me. The Seattle Police Department's evidence lockup was a sterile, caged room in the basement. O'Grady and Caldwell escorted Riley down the echoing concrete hallway. Caldwell walked 2 paces behind, his head down, clutching his tablet like a shield. He had been thoroughly, profoundly humiliated. When the evidence clerk pushed the heavy, latch-secured Pelican case across the counter, Riley didn't immediately take it. She popped the latches and opened the lid. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was the M2010 Enhanced Sniper Rifle. It was a masterpiece of lethal engineering, chambered in 338 Lapua Magnum, outfitted with a suppressed barrel and a state-of-the-art night vision optic system. Beside it lay the ghillie netting, a laser rangefinder, and a Kestrel weather meter. Riley quickly inspected the bolt and the chamber, ensuring nothing had been tampered with. Satisfied, she snapped the case shut. Operator Mercer, O'Grady said quietly, using her actual title for the first time. I have to ask, I've been a detective for 20 years. You had a clear egress route out of that grain terminal. The SWAT team didn't arrive for 3 minutes. A Tier 1 operator could have vanished in 30 seconds. You let us catch you. Why? Riley paused. She turned to face the veteran detective, her hazel eyes studying him. She recognized a good cop when she saw one. Because the 2 men I shot tonight weren't cartel, Detective O'Grady, Riley said, her voice low. O'Grady frowned. What do you mean? They had cartel tattoos. They were driving a vehicle registered to a known Reyes Syndicate shell company. Tattoos can be faked. Registrations can be forged, Riley explained, leaning casually against the chain-link fence of the evidence cage. Those men were highly trained private military contractors. Rogue elements. They were using encrypted satellite comms and military-grade infrared strobes. Cartel hitmen don't use that kind of gear. They were hired to execute the federal informant tonight, and they knew exactly where the informant was going to be, down to the minute. Caldwell, standing awkwardly in the background, suddenly cleared his throat. Well, that's impossible. The informant's transport schedule was classified. Only the top echelon of the FBI field office knew about it. Exactly, Riley said. She didn't look at O'Grady. She looked dead at Caldwell. The silence in the basement hallway stretched, tight as a piano wire. O'Grady looked back and forth between the two federal agents. "Wait," O'Grady said, his hand instinctively dropping to rest on his duty belt. "Are you saying there's a mole?" "I'm saying," Riley stepped slowly toward Caldwell, her boots making no sound on the concrete, "that the Department of Defense has been tracking a catastrophic intelligence leak in the Pacific Northwest for 6 months. High-level informants were ending up dead. Sanctioned raids were hitting empty warehouses. Someone inside the local federal apparatus was selling operational schedules to the highest bidder." Caldwell took a step back, his tablet pressed against his chest. That's a serious accusation, Mercer. You're out of your jurisdiction." "JSOC doesn't have a jurisdiction, David," Riley said, her voice a quiet, lethal purr. "We go where the threat is. My primary objective tonight was to keep the informant alive, but my secondary objective was to find the leak. I let local PD arrest me because I knew the FBI would immediately demand jurisdiction over a high-profile shooting involving a federal informant." Riley stopped, standing just 2 feet from the terrified FBI agent. "I needed to see who the Bureau sent to interrogate me," Riley continued, her eyes locked onto Caldwell's. "I needed to see who would be desperate enough to frame me, shut me up, and close the case before anyone looked too closely at the dead men in the SUV. I dropped that challenge coin to force you to make a phone call." Caldwell's breath hitched. "What phone call?" "The one you made to JSOC," Riley said, a terrifying, knowing smile finally touching her lips. "When you used your phone to call Admiral Croft, you opened a direct, unencrypted cellular bridge from your device to the NSA's Signal Intelligence Division at Fort Meade. In the 45 seconds you were on the line, they mirrored your phone. They downloaded every text, every encrypted offshore bank transfer, and every GPS ping you've made in the last 2 years." The color drained from Caldwell's face. The tablet slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly against the concrete floor. "You didn't catch a fake sniper tonight, Agent Caldwell," Riley whispered. "You caught a Trojan horse." Before Caldwell could even form a response, the heavy steel doors at the end of the basement hallway violently swung open. 4 men in tactical, unmarked black gear stepped into the corridor. They moved with a predatory, synchronized fluidness that O'Grady instantly recognized. They weren't police. They weren't standard FBI. They were the JSOC sweep team Admiral Croft had promised. The lead operator, a massive man with a thick beard and cold, dead eyes, walked straight past O'Grady and Riley without so much as a glance. He grabbed Caldwell by the lapels of his tailored charcoal suit and slammed him against the cinder block wall. "David Caldwell," the bearded man grunted, snapping heavy zip ties around the agent's wrists. "You are being detained under the Espionage Act. You have no right to remain silent, and you will not be afforded an attorney. You belong to the Department of Defense now." Caldwell didn't scream. He didn't fight. He went completely limp, sobbing quietly as the operators practically dragged him down the hallway and out into the Seattle night. O'Grady watched them go, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been a cop for a long time, but he had never seen the federal government move with such terrifying, brutal efficiency. He turned back to look at Riley. She was already picking up her heavy Pelican case, the strap slung easily over her shoulder. She looked exactly like she had when she first sat in the interrogation room, a civilian florist in a faded Pendleton flannel. "So," O'Grady said, his voice a bit raspy, "you own a plant nursery in Oregon?" Riley paused, adjusting the strap on her shoulder. "I do. Best hydrangeas in the Pacific Northwest." "And the sniper thing?" "Just a hobby," Riley said, her eyes twinkling with a dark, shared amusement. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the heavy bronze DevGru coin, and tossed it to O'Grady. He caught it instinctively, the heavy metal cold against his palm. "Keep it," Riley said. "If you ever find yourself in a situation where the badge isn't enough, call the number." O'Grady looked down at the skull and the etched words, "Red Squadron." When he looked back up, the basement hallway was empty. Riley Mercer was gone, leaving nothing behind but the faint smell of gun oil and the lingering echo of a world O'Grady knew he would never fully understand. If you love this intense, pulse-pounding story about stolen valor, hidden identities, and ultimate justice, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends who love military thrillers, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. Drop a comment below telling us what your favorite twist was, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Stay tuned, because our next story is going to be even wilder.